reluctantly sent out Stafford Cripps in the spring of 1942 to hold talks with Indian political leaders. Cripps had little of substance to offer during the war, but held out promises for the future. Gandhi reportedly scorned the Cripps offer, likening it to a post-dated check on a bank that was obviously failing. Meanwhile, Bose sought a clear declaration on the part of the Axis powers recognizing Indian independence. Mussolini was amenable to issuing such a declaration. But at Bose's only face-to-face meeting with Hitler, the German Führer hedged on the question of the declaration and on Bose's demand that references offensive to Indians in Mein Kampf be expunged. What Bose was able to extract from the Germans was logistical help to travel to Asia. Back in India, on 8th August 1942, the Congress under Gandhi passed a historic resolution moved by Nehru, demanding that the British quit India. We must take the risk of violence, Gandhi declared, to remove this great calamity of slavery. I will prefer anarchy to the present system of administration, because this ordered anarchy is worse than real anarchy. Gandhi's decision to launch a mass movement at this juncture appeared to be a vindication of Bose's line of thinking. Netaji made broadcasts to India in support of the movement, but he privately feared that the internal uprising had occurred too soon. The British resorted to ruthless repression to crush the Quit India movement in urban and rural areas alike. In early 1943, Subhash Chandra Bose wrote out a letter in Bengali for his elder brother Sharat. Today, I am once again embarking on the path of danger, but this time towards home. I may not see the end of the road. I have married here and have a daughter. In my absence, please give my wife and daughter the love you have given me throughout my life. On 8th February 1943, Netaji and his associate Abid Hassan began a perilous 90-day submarine journey. Starting from Kiel in Germany, they traveled around the north of Scotland, went down the length of the Atlantic Ocean, and rounded the Cape of Good Hope. Netaji was transferred in rough seas in the Indian Ocean from a German to a Japanese submarine. In the Japanese submarine, he passed south of India on his way to Sumatra, from where he flew to Japan.
India and Japan have in the past been bound by deep cultural ties which are about 20 centuries old. In recent times, these cultural relations have been interrupted because of the British domination of India. It is, however, certain that when India is free, these relations will be revived.
On 2nd July 1943, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose arrived in Singapore.
हिंद आ गए नाज़ हिंद को सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए, है नाज जिस पे हिंद को वो शान हिंद आ गए। सुभाष जान हिंद है, सुभाष मान हिंद है, सुभाष आन हिंद है, सुभाष शान हिंद है। सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए, है नाज जिस पे हिंद को वो शान हिंद आ गए। सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए, है नाज जिस पे।
On 4th July 1943, at a representative assembly of Indians living in Southeast Asia, Netaji accepted from Rashbihari Bose the leadership of the Indian independence movement.
Friends and comrades in arms, you might ask me what I did in Tokyo for what present I have brought for you. Well, I have brought for you this present.
In ringing tones and elegant Hindustani, Netaji spoke to the assembly, offering those who were prepared to follow him nothing but hunger, thirst, privation and death, on the historic march that would culminate in a victory parade at the Red Fort of Old Delhi.
जब हम फिर लाल किले दिल्ली में जाकर वहां हमारे विक्ट्री परेड करेंगे, हमारे रास्ते में आएगी भूख, प्यास, तकलीफें, दीवतें, मौत। कोई नहीं कह सकता है जिन लोग इस जंग में शरीक होंगे उनसे कितने लोग निकलेंगे जिंदा होगा। कोई बात नहीं है हम जिंदा रहेंगे या तो मरेंगे, कोई बात नहीं है। बात कोई सही बात यह है, अहम बात यह है, आखिर में हमारी कामयाबी होगी, हिंदुस्तान आजाद होगा।
On 5th July 1943, Netaji announced to the world that India's Army of Liberation, the Azad Hind Fauj, had come into being.
Our countrymen and our sisters and brothers at home have been doing their best in the circumstances in which they are placed. But the enemy is ruthless and desperate, and he is armed to the teeth. Against such a brutal foe, no amount of civil disobedience or of sabotage or of revolutionary terrorism can be of any avail. If therefore we want to expel British power from India, we have to fight the enemy with his own weapons. The enemy has already drawn the sword. He must therefore be fought with the sword. But it is not possible for our countrymen at home to organize an armed revolution and to fight the British Army of Occupation with modern arms. This is a task which must therefore devolve on Indians living abroad and particularly on Indians living in East Asia. Friends, if you compare the history of our national struggle with histories of similar struggles in other parts of the world, you will realize that we in India have lacked one thing and one thing alone. We lack the strength and organization whereby we can meet force with force. I am confident that with the help of my countrymen in East Asia, I shall be able to organize such a gigantic force as will be able to sweep away the British power from India in conjunction with those who have already been fighting at home. The hour has struck, and every patriotic Indian must advance towards the field of battle. Only when the blood of freedom-loving Indians begins to flow will India attain her freedom. Inqilab Zindabad. Azad Hind Zindabad.
He was a leader. Now you see me, I have broken down. I live 40 years, 50 years, and there are people like me who are prepared to do anything for Netaji. I am very lucky. I worked with Gandhiji, I worked with Panditji. They were all very great. Very, very great. India is proud of them. But there is only one person for whom I will die, and I will die 100th time, and that is Netaji. So what was in that man? And there are thousands like me who are prepared to give everything, everything. And that all over India, from every part of India, every community.
As tens of thousands of former soldiers of the British Indian Army agreed to join the Indian National Army, and an overwhelming majority of the 2.5 million Indian civilians in Southeast Asia responded with unprecedented fervor to the call for total mobilization, Netaji was able to systematically demolish colonial stereotypes of martial and non-martial races and castes. Members of all castes, creeds, and communities rallied to the cause of the Indian National Army. There were Muslims and Sikhs from the northwest frontier province and the Punjab. There were Tamils from South India. There were battle-hardy professional soldiers, and there were new recruits drawn from the large population of rubber plantation workers. For the first time, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, and Christian soldiers sat down to dine together. Hindustani, written in the Roman script, became their lingua franca. In another revolutionary move, Netaji formed a women's regiment of the Indian National Army, named after the legendary heroine of the 1857 revolt, the Rani of Jhansi. This regiment, commanded by Lakshmi Swaminathan, was designed to contribute not only to national liberation, but more importantly, to the social emancipation of Indian women.
Women also have to fight for their freedom, and in the case of women, they will be fighting for two things. One, the independence of their country, and the second thing is their own independence and emancipation. Because he said, I have always felt very strongly that our Indian women who are capable of reaching tremendous heights, they are so completely neglected. Not only neglected, they are suppressed by our archaic social laws. So unless they fight for their own emancipation along with the freedom of the country, our country also won't progress in the right direction, and this is a very necessary thing.
As the Indian National Army prepared to invade northeastern India, Netaji's home province, Bengal, was being devastated by a man-made famine. The British were only interested in provisioning their own troops and industrial workers engaged in war production. It was a quiet holocaust in which nearly 3.5 million people lost their lives. On 1st September 1943, Netaji asked the British to provide safe passage for ships which would carry relief supplies of rice from Burma. The government nervously suppressed the news of this offer, along with news of all other activities of the INA. In radio broadcasts beamed towards India, Netaji tried to bolster the morale of his compatriots at home.
স্বাধীন ভারতে সকল কারাগারের লৌহ কবাট উন্মুক্ত হইবে এবং ভারত মাতার শ্রেষ্ঠ সন্তানেরা তখন কারা প্রকোষ্ঠের অন্ধকার হইতে মুক্তি ও আনন্দের নির্মল আলোকে বাইর হইয়া জয়মাল্যে ভূষিত হইবেন। ইনকিলাব জিন্দাবাদ, আজাদ হিন্দ জিন্দাবাদ।
On 21st October 1943, Netaji proclaimed the formation of the Provisional Government of Free India in Singapore.
पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा चंचल सागर विंध्य हिमालय नीला यमुना गंगा तेरे नित्य गुण गाये.
In November 1943, Netaji attended the Greater East Asia Conference in Tokyo. Although he went as an observer, his eloquent speech appeared to dominate the proceedings. He held a summit meeting with Premier General Tojo, which enabled the Azad Hind government to resolve difficulties it was having in dealing with some of the more arrogant and short-sighted Japanese officers.
Your names will go down in history, not merely as the makers of a new republic, not merely as the makers of a new East Asia, not merely as the makers of a new Asia, but as the makers and the architects of a new world.
The Azad Hind government acquired its first territories when the Japanese handed over jurisdiction of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the Bay of Bengal. During a visit in December 1943, Netaji paid homage to generations of revolutionaries who had spent life sentences in the notorious cellular jail on Andaman Island. Netaji renamed the two main islands Shaheed and Swaraj.
ऊंचा है दुनिया में झंडा हमारा नेताजी जिंदाबाद आजाद करेंगे सबसे ऊंचा है दुनिया में झंडा हमारा.
In January 1944, by arrangement with Burmese leaders Ba Maw and Aung San, the INA headquarters were moved forward to Rangoon. The INA went into action against the British forces on the Arakan front. On 18th March 1944, the soldiers of liberation crossed the Indo-Burma frontier and, advancing towards Kohima and Imphal, planted the tricolour on Indian soil.
खुशी के गीत गाए जा ये जिंदगी है कौम की तो कौम पे लुटाए जा कदम कदम बढ़ाए जा खुशी के गीत गाए जा ये जिंदगी है कौम की तो कौम पे लुटाए जा.
The Battle of Imphal turned out to be one of the bloodiest battles of the Second World War. The British had an ally with power and pelf in the United States. The Japanese, badly overextended in the Pacific, were unable to supply the INA and Japanese forces fighting in India. Thousands of INA soldiers became martyrs in hills and jungles of northeastern India. Others fought brave rearguard actions down the Irrawaddy Delta of Burma in late 1944. Then, in the spring of 1945, they made an epic retreat with their leader on foot from Burma to Thailand and back to Malaya. The march to Delhi had been halted at Imphal. But, as Netaji had prophesied, the roads to Delhi were many, and Delhi still remained the goal. In the weeks before the war ended, a memorial was erected on the sea face at Singapore to the fallen heroes of the INA. On it was inscribed their motto, Ittefaq, Itmad, Qurbani, unity, faith, sacrifice. In an intemperate act of vandalism, Mountbatten's forces blew up this monument to the war dead on their arrival in Singapore. As the Japanese surrendered in mid-August, Netaji decided to try to make contact with the Soviet Union. He flew from Singapore to Vietnam and then took off again from Saigon on 17th August 1945.
He was tragically killed in an air crash in Taiwan on 18th August 1945. But some in the subcontinent refused to accept that he was no more, and have only recently come to terms with the mortal end of a deathless hero.
The end of World War II did not ring down the curtain on the saga of Netaji and the INA. In the autumn of 1945, nationalist forces inside India were despondent and in disarray. At that critical moment, the Indian National Army, in the form of tens of thousands of prisoners of war, and the story of their amazing struggle between 1943 and 1945 descended upon the Indian political scene as a godsend. To the people of India, it was a rejuvenating and revolutionizing experience. The British, on their part, made a major error of decision by putting on public trial at the Red Fort 3 INA officers charged with waging war against the King Emperor. Shah Nawaz Khan, born in a Muslim family of Janjua Rajputs in Rawalpindi; Prem Sahgal, born in a Hindu family at Hoshiarpur; and Gurbaksh Singh Dhillon, born in a Sikh family in Lahore district.
Before our trial started, the British had kept everything concerning Netaji, the movement, the INA, everything under wraps. People didn't know anything about it. The whole idea was that they wanted to show to the Indian people that a few renegades had joined the Japanese. But once the trial started, the truth came out. And when the truth came out, it had impact not only in the Indian public, but also in the British Indian Army.
The Indian National Congress formed a team of defense lawyers led by Bhulabhai Desai and including Jawaharlal Nehru. Mahatma Gandhi hailed Netaji as a prince among patriots and said of the INA, "They have a lot to their credit of which they might well be proud. The greatest among these was to gather together under one banner men from all religions and races of India." Other political parties, including the Muslim League, came out in support of the men and women of the INA. The court-martial sentenced the 3 INA officers to deportation for life. But the Indian people were on the side of Netaji's soldiers, and the sentence proved to be politically untenable. No longer certain of the Indian soldiers' loyalty to the British Crown, Commander-in-Chief Claude Auchinleck decided to release Sahgal, Dhillon, and Shah Nawaz. Sharat Chandra Bose, who had himself just returned from a 4-year spell in detention, recalled the trial of Emperor Bahadur Shah at the Red Fort nearly a century ago and expressed his faith. Freedom's battle once begun, bequeathed by bleeding sire to son, though baffled oft, is ever won. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose provided to his countrymen in 1945-46, in absentia and as a direct outcome of his wartime activities, a unique opportunity to realize the aims of complete independence and a federal union. He paved the way for the liberation of other subject peoples of the British Empire by destroying the most vital instrument of colonial subjugation, the British Indian Army. By a tragic irony, the man who commanded Indian history in the winter of 1945-46 did not appear. The country paid the price of refusing to heed his warning never to compromise with injustice and wrong when dominion status came to a partitioned subcontinent in 1947. Nobody can lose, Netaji had written in his political testament in 1940